Are you telling your investor clients to expect anything on both bills before the end of the year?
I think the timeline for the end of the year is absolutely still on. I think that the timeline for trying to get it this week was always wishful thinking. I think what you heard from Senator Manchin is that there are a number of steps to take before you can say that you are for or against this bill. We don't have full bill text that has been agreed to. We haven't had a score by the Congressional Budget Office and the Joint Committee on Taxation. We have not gone through what's known as the birdbath to see what stays and what comes out in the Senate. And in March, when they try to get a $1.9 trillion bill through, there were a couple of surprises that Manchin had to work to get out at the last minute. And so if you try to pull over a couple of things on him in March, he's not going to say yes until he sees all of that information coming out. And that's not something that can get done within the next 24 hours and probably not this week.
But President Biden last week came out and hailed, right before he went off to G20, hailed a victory. A framework for a deal had been reached. So why does this feel like it keeps happening and every time it does, we can't get there? It seems like a pretty sharply divided Democratic Party.
Yeah, so I think what you're seeing is there is a desire among Democrats to create false deadlines and a narrative of that this is moving forward. And every time we have a deadline, a little bit more of this gets done. The only real deadline is probably members of Congress wanting to go home for the December holidays, as well as the need to get the debt limit finally accomplished this year. They know that, but there is so much wood to chop here that they're trying to use each one of these actions, and it does feel like Groundhog Day. It does feel like false starts, but this is all done purposely by the White House, by Speaker Pelosi, by Manchin, by Schumer, trying to kind of incrementally inch along to see if they can get that deal struck, which still is much more likely than not. But we have to go through this process before everyone can say yes or no on the final package.
And if and when this does pass, is it net positive for Biden's approval ratings, or has it been so drawn out, and is it divisive enough as a big spending bill often can be, that it doesn't really improve them either way?
You know, I think, I think that is going to be a longer-term debate. I think that the debate I am focused on at Raymond James is what's the impact on the market. And I would say that if this gets done, I think this does set up for a positive year-end rally where the overall fiscal cliff that a lot of investors were concerned about mid this year is not going to happen. You see front-loaded fiscal stimulus here, as well as the tax hit, that potential draw from the economy is not going to be nearly as impactful as feared. So Biden, I think he can figure that out himself. But from a market perspective, I think this is setting up nicely, Will.
If you look at what Joe Manchin is worried about, the senator cites the impact on inflation. He cites budget gimmicks. Treasury Secretary Yellen last week told me that this is an anti-inflation bill that should actually boost supply for things like workers and put pressure on prices. Do you expect it to get scored that way? And could that be what gets us over the line here?
Yeah, Sarah, that's an important question. And I don't think we're going to have answers to all of Senator Manchin's questions. We are in an unprecedented fiscal experiment. We have spent trillions of dollars in ways that we have never done before. I think as you look at the bill itself, some of it is budget tricks. We wrote this in a report last week in terms of how you can get different budget tricks done. If you only fund a program for 2 years instead of 10 years, that only scores as 20% of the cost. But sometimes there's nothing more permanent than a temporary government program. So those are the things that he is trying to make sure those tricks don't get into a final deal. But I do think that the overall dollar amount is going to be much higher than whatever that score is. We're looking at SALT. It looks like it's more likely than not to get a 2-year relief there, paid for by fully having a SALT tax come back on in years 9 and 10 of this bill. So that's a legitimate debate to have. I don't know if we will have a conclusion to that debate before the end of this year when this likely does pass.